the first Indologist like Max Muller, whatever his qualities, post-dated the Vedas because he believed that, the word was created by God, by the Christian God, 4,000 years before Christ. So there was no possibility that the Vedas were written at least 5,000 to 10,000 years before Christ, And then, of course, demonizing of the Hindus, the glorifying of the enemies of Hindus like Aurangzeb or Tipu Sultan, the downsizing of the heroes and heroines of the Hindus like Maharana Pratap, Shivaji Maharaj, or the great heroines like Tarabai, Rani Kito Chenama, Rani Urgency, of course, is more well known, but there's so many of them. And then the history of the Indian independence movement, and that the credit is only given to Mr. Nehru and Mr. Gandhi, but actually much before them, there were Tilak and Sri Aurobindo who did believe that the British had to leave India in the early 1900s by force if necessary. They had in the spirit of the Bhagavad Gita, that the enemy, the Asura, needs to be fought if necessary physically, knowing that only the body dies, the soul, is eternal. So in that book, I have set the record straight. Like Ashoka, for instance, who's been also made a hero by Nehru. Ashoka the Great was supposed to have converted to Buddhism because Buddhism is considered to be politically correct today and in those days. But actually, he was a very cruel emperor. He was called Chand Ashoka, Ashoka the Cruel. Namaste, everybody. Good evening. Of course, the idea of writing this book is to stop the demonizing of India. But as a journalist, I feel that this demonizing is going on right at the moment. So I would like to divide my talk into three parts. The contemporary, the actual demonizing of India, the causes of this demonizing, and the remedy, what to do to stop the demonizing of India. So we do a little bit of historical background. I think the demonizing started with the arrival of the missionaries, with the British, when the British started allowing missionaries to come to India. The demonizing started. Before that, at least in my country, in France, India was highly regarded, up to, even in Germany, up to Nietzsche, up to Hegel, up to the great philosopher of the end of the 19th century. In India was highly regarded. The Vedas, the Upanishad, Nietzsche used to quote from the Vedas, Hegel, so many Kant, so many of them quoted from the Upanishad and the Vedas. In my country, great writers like Voltaire and later Jean-Jacques Rousseau knew the Vedas, knew the Upanishad. But then there was a break. The missionaries started propagating an image of an India which was with adoring many gods, which was not monotheistic. So at that time it started, and it created an entire generation of Indologists who were hostile to India. And today it's still a fact that in France there is a gentleman called Christophe Jaffrelot, whom I know, who's like my personal enemy, and I'm a personal enemy to him. He spent his entire life to demonizing India. He's written book after book after book to demonize particularly the Hindus. Even the Hindus who live abroad, he wrote an entire book on them saying that, they are funding fundamentalism, Hindu fundamentalism in India. In the US, of course, we know about Audrey Truchke, we know about Witzel, but there are so many of them all over the world who are supposed to be specialists on India to enlighten their people, Europeans or Americans, about India, which is a faraway country, difficult to understand for a man sitting in Paris or in New York or in London who has little or no knowledge about India. So these people are often paid by the state, by the government. In France, the CNRS, the institute of which Christophe Jaffrelot is the leader, is subsidized by the French government. So these people, instead of enlightening their people, the Frenchmen, for instance, they keep running down India, talking about caste. The obsession about caste that Indologists have is amazing. It amazes me whenever I write a book and I do a Google search on caste. There are millions and millions of studies on caste by Indologists. On caste, poverty, Hindu fundamentalism, persecution of Hindus. So this was particularly striking during the removal of Article 370. Now, this is an example I want to give because it's very recent and it's very easy for people to understand. Now, I have covered Kashmir extensively as a journalist, particularly during the terrible years from uh, beginning of 90s till 2001, 2002, when so many people died, when the Kashmiri Hindus were chased out of the Valley of Kashmir. So I know Kashmir fairly well. And I know also that it's a complicated problem. Now, the Western journalists who are posted in India from the New York Times or Le Monde or the Guardian in London, whatever, instead of reporting the complexity of Kashmir, that Kashmir is divided in three. Indians know it, but Westerners don't know it. They think the entire Kashmir is Muslim, but actually the Valley of Kashmir is now entirely or 99% Muslim, though in 1900 there were still 1 million Hindus there. Ladakh is predominantly Buddhist, and disciple of the Dalai Lama, and Jammu is as a majority of Hindus, though it has been dwindling recently. So it's a very complex thing. And then why did nobody care, neither the Western correspondents in Delhi nor the Indologists care to explain what was Article 370, that it was a very unjust system whereby any Kashmiri could invest in India, build a house, start a business, flourish. But Indians could not buy land in Kashmir or start a business or build a house. So it was a very, very unjust thing. And Mr. Modi did the wrong thing right. But it was never explained. It was just portrayed as a persecution of the Muslim. In my country, in France, I know good people in my family. My publisher, I have published a book on the Dalai Lama and another one on Ayurveda, and I'm writing one on pranayama for the same publisher, a big publisher in France. So the lady who was in charge of my book, very nice lady, very decent lady, she thinks that India is a dictatorship and Muslims are persecuted, and I'm helpless to say, because the very people who are supposed to enlighten Frenchmen and French women are demonizing India, particularly at the moment, the BJP and Mr. Modi, but generally the Hindus. I mean, this hatred against the Hindus is something that baffles me, because the Hindus are such good people, such tolerant people. So Article 370 is a very good example. And today, the bad publicity that was generated by this unfair coverage of Article 70 still goes on. I mean, I don't know about what Mr. Biden is going to do, but for sure the Democrats in the United States believe that Muslims are persecuted in India. So the demonizing of India is even happening with the COVID. I remember a year ago when the COVID started, many of my friends and the Western press saying that millions of people are going to die in India. I know some of my Western friends here in Pondicherry or in Delhi who ran back to their countries because they were told that India would, the hospital system in India would collapse and millions of people would die. So actually, the millions died more in the West than in India. No doubt COVID hit India, but Indians have an immunity system which is stronger than Westerners who are living in a very sanitized, very, very, clean world, so-called clean world, clean physically, but not clean mentally. So during the COVID also, there's been the demonizing of India. And of course, Mr. Modi has been attacked repeatedly for many things, particularly on Kashmir and the human rights in India. Now, what are the causes of what are the causes? What is the reason behind this demonizing of India? As I said, the missionaries started it, but I believe that more than anything, Westerners have an unconscious complex of superiority. I've seen it in many Western journalists who come to India. They believe that the civilization, that the democracy, that the culture is superior to the Indian one. That India is an inferior country. They may not, consciously think about it. They may not express it openly, but it is there very much, and it is there in people that we know. It was there in Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa, however much good work she did, believed that Indians were inferior and that they couldn't care about their own poor or lepers or destitutes or dying people. I think the same is true of Sonia Gandhi. Whatever her qualities, and I'm sure she has good qualities, she has this also superiority complex that I know better. I'm Westerner, I'm a Christian, and I know better. So behind this, again, if you go one layer behind, there is, of course, the Judeo-Christian civilization that believes that my God is the only true God. Today, Christianity has evolved, no doubt. I think uh, not in India. Christianity in India has gone back to what was in the 19th century in Europe, but Christianity has evolved. But still, Christians believe that there is only one true God, Jesus Christ, and Indians adore heathen gods, no pagan gods, and though they're inferior. So behind this superiority complex, there is also this monotheism that that Islam and Christianity have today so strongly, that my God is the only true God. If you don't believe in that God, you're inferior, and I need to convert you if necessary by unethical means, by financial means, and maybe you need to be forcibly converted. So this is a great problem because how do you reason with these people? How do you reason with these people? Now it translates, of course, in a lot of Hinduphobia. There is a more targeted attack. Of course, India is attacked. India, a country of poor people. India, a country of slums. And we know that film like that Slumdog Millionaire or the City of Joy have kind of made a Bollywood fantasy of poverty in India, that every the whole of India is a slum. And so again, Westerners are surprised when they come here, or when you tell them that actually there's a lot of wealth in India, both hidden and open. There's people who are very rich, much richer than in France. So it's a difficult problem because the image I cling to India, I have fought against them for 30 years as a journalist and writer, but I can't say that I've been successful. Christophe Jaffrelot, the leader of the Indologists in France, has the upper hand, because whenever something happens in India, either big catastrophe or big elections like Mr. Modi's elections, or whatever, the newspaper, the television turn towards these Indologists because they think that they know better. I, I've been writing, and I've written 29 books on India, trying to, prop up this wonderful country, whatever its fault. But so far, it's been a losing battle. It's only if India becomes economically strong, like the Chinese do, that we have a chance. Because power today is economic. I mean, if you buy 100 Airbuses or 10 nuclear centrals, then you have power. Then people are listening to you. You gain respect. But at the moment, I don't think India has this economic clout that the Chinese have. So nobody listens. Nobody listens, and it saddens me because it's so unjust. It's so unjust. The story of Kashmir, of the Article 370, again, is so unfair because if you look at the facts, if you look at the way, the Hindus there was an ethnic cleansing of the Hindus in the Valley of Kashmir for no other reason than their religion. It strikes you that it's something that you have to open your eyes. You have to start thinking. You have to start studying. But it doesn't happen. Neither does it happen with Indologists, nor does it happen with the Western correspondents who are sitting in India, who are there in India, who have access to everything. We can go to Kashmir, meet the people, meet the Kashmiri Pandit. So in the end, if you go back one more layer, it's a battle between, okay, we will not go into big words, it's not good and evil, it's the Indian sense is more accurate, between dharma, what tends to go towards the better, that wants to uplift humanity, and the adharma or the asuric, that which always drags you down, whether it is individually or it is collectively in nations. So ultimately, it is that battle. You take one layer after one layer after one layer, and you come to this. I think today there is a knowledge in India which is very precious. Who am I? What happens when I die? What is consciousness? How God manifests himself or herself at different times using different names. What is rebirth? What is karma? What is dharma? What is an avatar? So this knowledge is being attacked, and consciously. People, Westerners who have power, whether they're Indologists or whether they're journalists, because today journalism is power. Whatever you say about the social media, it doesn't have the power that has the mainstream media. People say, oh, social media, but social media doesn't have that power. What people read, what the politician in Paris, the French president, is going to read is Le Monde newspaper, which is the leading leftist newspaper in France, and indeed a very well written, and very, very brilliant paper. But what is Le Monde going to say? Le Monde going to say Mr. Modi is a dangerous right-wing fascist. He's introduced dictatorship in India. Muslims are persecuted. Okay, say it maybe in more subtle ways, sometimes not in subtle ways. So this is what the French president is going to read. Are you going to read that, and he's going to influence his decision? The French businessman who wants to invest in India will have at the back of his mind images of poverty, of caste, of Muslim being persecuted. So it's affecting India in many ways, not only in the image of India, but in geopolitics and in economic politics. Because, as I said, economic is what's more important. So what to do? What to do? I have done a lot, but that is not enough. So it's up to the Indian government. We don't have to go overboard like the Chinese, but India has to gain some respect, and India cannot gain any respect unless it acts tough. I see the BBC, the radio and the television of the colonizers of India, the people who bled India dry, the people who induced famines during the Second World War that killed millions of people, millions of Indians, so they could feed their soldiers. The people who looted India, whose art and statues and temple statues are lying all over England in their museums, including the biggest museums in London. So these people's radio and television, the BBC, is one of the most hostile, which demonizes India. And it's so obvious, day after day after day, you read the BBC or you watch the BBC and you see how much they demonize India. Why cannot the Indian government act? The Chinese, they wouldn't do it in China, because in China, they know they'll be ejected in 3 days. They'll lose their license. The BBC, it's all about money again. It's all about economics. India is a huge country. It's got a number power. It's got, brain power. It's got an economic power. But I see, I've sent messages to Mr. Modi. I have some access to him, that, some action has to be taken. But no, the Hindu thing is, the Hindu, when it comes to power, is, I want to be loved, I want to be appreciated, I want to be loved, I want to show that I have tolerance. So it affected the Vajpayee government, our good thing, and it seems to be affecting the Narendra Modi government, that I need to show that I'm secular. So, but the thing is that nobody respects you. Nobody respects you. The BBC knows that they get away with anything. CNN knows it gets away with anything. Le Monde knows. The Guardian, which has been demonizing Indian and Hindus, knows. The New York Times, which has done a personal vendetta war against Mr. Modi for the last 15 years and written all kind of slander. They know. They know that they can say anything. Nothing will happen to them. So one of the answers is, I think, toughness, that the Indian government needs to show more toughness, and not toughness against OCI, because at the moment they're showing some toughness against OCI, people of Indian origin, or people like me who have lived for 50 years in India and made their own country, and now they're restricting, this passport of OCI, which shows already a glorified long-term visa, and they're putting so many restrictions on it. This is not the way. The way is you kicked out a BBC correspondent, and the entire Western corps will take notice. They will not write rubbish like they will think twice before slandering and lying. You kick one of them out. The Chinese will kick the entire BBC. No need. You kick one of the journalists out. And then people say, okay, let me be a little more careful now in what I say. But this is not happening. This is not happening. Instead, there are now more restrictions for visa, there are more restrictions in banking, there are more restrictions for OCI than there was during the Congress government. It was easier to do business during the Congress government. It was easier to have a visa. It was easier for a Westerner to start a business in India. Many Westerners want to invest in India, but it is so difficult now because the government, instead of having a square approach, against the demonization, is going roundabout, and actually to get the 3% missionaries, the 3% Western journalists, the 3% Indologists, they're targeting 97% good people. The OCI, the people, who want to invest in India. It's impossible today to open a bank account in India for a Westerner. Absolutely impossible. It's impossible. And, I'm building this museum in Pune, so we have a small FCRA account, whether we can receive donations from abroad. We have a sister concern in the US called FACT USA. They send maybe $10,000 a year. There's no big donation. But now, if you have an FCRA account, the amount of paperwork that you have to do is incredible. We have to shift our entire FCRA account from Pondicherry, where it is based, to Delhi SBI. So all the FCRA accounts in India have to shift to SBI Delhi, which is really, really difficult. I have some people to help, already it's difficult. But the good, NGOs, who are doing good work, in the villages, it's going to be hell for them. And this again to target the 3% missionaries and 3% journalists. So it's a wrong approach. But so my approach, first approach is toughness. Second approach is you have to create a school of Indology in India, where you fashion young Western Indologists who are more open, more plastic, who will listen and bring them to India, give them a little bit of grounding into Indian history, ancient Indian history, a little bit of Sanskrit, a little bit of, on-site, visit temples, go to Benares, see a little bit of the village India, the rural India, understand India better, and then you send them back to the country. In time, they will rise in the ranks and they will become friends of India. I've been telling 3 HRD ministers I met, I have some access to the government. So I met Smriti Irani. She actually started something, but it floundered because she was a very imperious lady and, she kind of fought with everybody. And then Mr. Javadekar, a very good man, and I told him, sir, we need to start a school of Indology in India, preferably in Benares, in Varanasi, so that people have some, with the Ganges, and they will get something in the end, they will feel something. And then now I've talked to Mr. Ramesh Pokhriya, who is also a very good man, but it's not happening because because you tell me why it's not happening. So these are the two things, important things, and then of course the rest is up to the grace of God, because India has been protected. Of course, we see countries like Egypt or Greece who had this knowledge. They had some knowledge, they knew, and they were wiped out. They were just wiped out. South America was wiped out by Christianity. The entire South America became Christian. So they lost, the Aztec and the Inca indigenous culture and religion. But in India, somehow, in spite of all the trauma, it was preserved. So some grace has been there. Sri Aurobindo used to say that, India was one of God's favorite countries. So that grace is also important to protect India, because at the moment, the demonization is happening not only at the hands of Western Indologists, but the missionaries, of course, who are in India. They tell the new converts that, if you enter a temple, you're committing a sin, you might go to hell. If you put putu on your forehead, you're also committing a sin. If you do puja, you're committing a very serious sin, you'll go to hell. Then, of course, you have the leftist, the communists in India, who are, it's probably the last communism in the world. The Chinese don't practice communism anymore. In Cuba, I think they're slowly veering towards capitalism. But in India, there's a very strong and sincere communism that influences so much the journalists. Generation after generation of journalists, has this Marxist, and this Western Marxist mindset. So they look at India with very hostile eye. This is why you read any newspaper, you see any television, you start to get. I stopped having newspaper in my house in the last 20 years, because you were depressed. The only time I read newspaper is when I fly. So either the paper in the plane, I open it and look. But this Marxist, hostile demonization of India is very dangerous also, because many of India's intellectual elite and teachers, and the teachers who export themselves and go to American universities and demonize India there also. Mr. Modi has mostly been demonized by Indians in American universities who say, and so they listen to. So toughness, toughness is, one is toughness, two is, toughness against journalists, particularly, who are there in India and are, of course, dependent on the government of India's goodwill for their visa and stay. And also the school of Indology and prayer. The last one is prayer, that somehow this knowledge will survive all these attacks from within and without. Thank you.
You can always refer to François-G's books to get more of him. Apart from that, François-G, I had a question. Is there a link for, yes, that's François-G's book.
I'll say a few words about this book, because I have put a lot into it. Now, of course, Indian history is not written as it happened. There is also a demonizing of India in books. All the dates have been post-dated. The first Indologist, like Max Muller, whatever his quality, post-dated the Vedas, because he believed that the word was created by God, by the Christian God, 4,000 years before Christ. So there was no possibility that the Vedas were written at least 5,000 to 10,000 years before Christ. And then, of course, demonizing of the Hindus, the glorifying of the enemies of Hindus like Aurangzeb or Tipu Sultan, the downsizing of the heroes and heroines of the Hindus like Maharana Pratap, Shivaji Maharaj, or the great heroines like Tarabai, Rani Kito Chenama, Rani Urgency, of course, is more well known, but there's so many of them. And then the history of the Indian independent movement, that the credit is only given to Mr. Nehru and Mr. Gandhi, but actually much before them, there were Tilak and Sri Aurobindo, who did believe that the British had to leave India in the early 1900s by force if necessary. They had in the spirit of the Bhagavad Gita, that the enemy, the Asura, needs to be fought if necessary physically, knowing that only the body dies, the soul, is eternal. So in that book, I have set the record straight. I think it's the first book in the world, both in India and in the world, that sets up all the records. Like Ashoka, for instance, who's been also made a hero by Nehru. Ashoka the Great was supposed to have converted to Buddhism, because Buddhism is considered to be politically correct today and in those days, but actually he was a very cruel emperor. He was called Chand Ashoka the Cruel, and he used to burn. There was a conflict between Jains and Buddhists in those days. He took the side of Buddhists, and he used to burn entire families of Jains in their houses. So he was an extremely cruel guy. He killed his entire family except his half brother. So again, I set the record straight. So it's a very important book. I have not written it for money. In fact, I'm not getting, it's a very complicated story. I've written it for the glory of this country, to set the record straight. So please buy this book and propagate it around you, so that Indian history is known as it happened, not as it has been written.
I wanted to know, is there a website or some place where you can ask for public donations, or people can donate for the new museum that you're building in Pune?
Yes. If you can subtitle, if you can write it, it's factmuseum.com, FACT, factmuseum.com in one word. That is the website of the museum. And then people can send me an email also if they want to donate. We have tax exemption both in the US, in India, and in UK. And we are at the moment making a wonderful exhibition on Vijayanagar, the last great Hindu empire, which acted as a bulwark against Muslim invasion to the south, and its demise was unfortunate. And they say that the river ran blood for many months. Millions of statues. If you go to Hampi today, you see that every statue, and there are not millions, but there are tens of thousands of statues. Their nose and ears have been chopped because they were so massive they couldn't break the statue. So the Muslims used to chop the nose and chop. So it's an extraordinary place. So we're doing that exhibition now at the moment, and then we're doing a series of exhibition on Indian women, remarkable Indian women warriors. The first one is the mother of Shivaji Maharaj, Jija Mata, who bred into Shivaji Maharaj's sense of pride and sense of heroism and sense of nationalism. And then, of course, Rani Kittur Chennamma from Karnataka, very extraordinary queen, then Tarabai and Aliabai of Indore. So we have. I'm building an entire pavilion where this exhibition will be there. It's a lot of work, and it's a Seva museum. My wife and I do it, as a Seva. So I need your generosity. So they can send me a mail at francoisgauthier26.com if they want to donate.
If you could, for the benefit of somebody who has not read your earlier books, you have a History of India, a book which was published earlier, and a new book, an entirely new History of India. So in short, if you can just tell us what drew you to update that earlier book in the new book now, and what is the difference that you have added?
Yeah, so actually I'm not a historian. I came to India and I had done a bit of journalism before. So when I started doing freelance journalism, as I said, I covered Kashmir. One of my first assignments was Kashmir for many years, and so Kashmir opened my eyes. Before, I had mostly the prejudices and the ignorance of most Western journalists about India. But when I saw what happened in Kashmir, I started studying Indian history, particularly Aurangzeb, because Aurangzeb is very central to so many things. Kashmir, of course, but also the shadow of Aurangzeb is there around the world. The hard Sunni, fundamentalism that Aurangzeb embodied in such a meticulous and such a ruthless manner, an intelligent manner, is today taken over the world. The soft side of Islam, where many people say that Sufism was not that soft, but I have done an exhibition on Dara Shukor, so Aurangzeb's brother. He was definitely a guy who thought that Islam had roots into the Upanishads. He translated the Upanishads from Sanskrit to Farsi. So that soft side of Islam has gone from the world, and Aurangzeb's shadow is ruling the world today. Muslims are becoming more and more radical. Whatever, again, there is no good and bad Muslim. There are a lot of fabulous people who are Muslim, but the scripture was written a long time ago in the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th century for these times. I know it's very valid for this time, but it's been transported today without being adapted. And so it creates a tremendous clash today that we saw in Kashmir. Kashmir, most of the Muslims today in Kashmir are converted Hindus. So I started studying Indian history, and I did an exhibition on Aurangzeb, according to his own record, because, as I said, Aurangzeb was a very meticulous emperor, and every order he passed, he had it written down in Farsi and sealed, put the emperor's seal either himself or his wazirs. So these are all preserved, actually. I wish that people like Romila Tapar or Ode Tushke would go and, when my professor, which I employed for this exhibition, went to the archive, they're mostly kept in the Bikaner archives, to study these seals of Aurangzeb. The curator of that museum was a Muslim, said, "Oh, sir, you're the first one who's coming for many years to my museum, because nobody comes and studies this." So we studied it within an exhibition based only on Aurangzeb's order. whether it is the razing down of the Somnath temple or forbidding Hindus to ride horses or elephants, or the imposition of the jizya tax, or trampling down, Hindus with his elephants. So these are all recorded, so we don't need to put any comment. So we did that exhibition, and then I started studying more. I did exhibition after exhibition after exhibition, and ultimately I put them in that museum because I had so many exhibitions, I didn't know what to do with them. So, as I said, I'm not a historian, but studying Indian history, it is very obvious that it is written in a very partial manner. Yesterday and today, I'm a disciple of Sri Aurobindo. Sri Aurobindo was an immense philosopher who wrote great books. He was a revolutionary himself before becoming a yogi, and he was an immense poet too. So I have read Sri Aurobindo, and I've studied what he said very carefully. And obviously, when you read Indian history, the books that are both abroad and here, it's very partial. And again, we come across this demonization. So that's how I started writing books. My first book on Indian history was published by a gentleman called Sitaram Goel, who had read my articles. He was one of the pioneers of Hindu, pride, and he had read my articles in the 90s. In the Indian Express, I had a column in the Indian Express called the Ferengis column, and also in a newspaper in Bombay called Blitz, I think. Blitz, yeah. And so he asked me he said he would publish a collection of my articles. And those days there was no internet, so I got his letter, and I wrote him back saying, I'd rather write a book from scratch. And so I wrote my first history book called The Wonder That Is India, because there's a book by an Australian called Mr. Basham, which is called The Wonder That Was India, where he said, yeah, India was good, a good thing, but, that wonder is gone. So I wrote that first book. And then after that, I wrote book after book. There's a new history of India, the history of India as it happened. I have wrote many books, but this one is the best because it's the most researched. Since then, there were many archaeological, linguistic, and genetic discoveries. For instance, the Aryan invasion, which is still taken as the foundation of Indian history, that white people, came from the West, colonized the Dravidians and the tribals, imposed on them the Hindu religion and the caste system and the Vedas, etc. It's totally false. Swami Vivekananda said it, Sri Aurobindo said it, there was no proof. But now there's genetic proof that most Indians share the same genes. There's the same genes in most Indians, whether South, North, or Brahmin, no different. So it's very, very important. I have an exhibition in my museum also, but this is very, very important. So in that book, I have put the latest discoveries, and I have brushed upon subjects which I didn't before, like the Iron Age, like Ashoka, so many things. So for me, it is my best book, and without flattering myself, it is probably today the only book that I know of which portrays Indian history as much as possible as it happened.
My question is regarding the terminology that you used as to where the problem with India. I would like your comments on whether or not this is a specifically Hindu problem, in the sense of Hindus being perceived very differently compared to how Westerners perceive Christians or Muslims. Right. Because the point is that there are Central American countries that are just as poor, if not poorer. There is Pakistan also, which is practically the same country, but they do not seem to get this kind of treatment at the hands of scholars, reporters, and so on. Right. And this is not a question of economics. So can you please elaborate on that?
So I'll answer by a counter question. You see, today the Hindus are 1.2 billion in the world. It's one of the most educated, most forward, most law-abiding, most richest communities in the world. Wherever the Hindus have gone, whether it's as laborer in Mauritius or whether it's IT engineers in America or doctors in the UK, they have flourished, they have done well, they have earned degrees, their children have top universities, they have 3 cars. So Hindus have numbers, brains, and economic power, but they're so disunited, actually. It's the fault of Hindus. The fact that Hindus are targeted all the time because Hindus, are disunited, completely disunited. You see in the US, the lobby of the Jews, who are 10 times less than Hindus, the lobby that the Jews have in the United States is immense, immense. They influence election, they influence the Congress, nothing is decided without them. But the Hindus in the United States, and I've traveled quite a lot, I gave a lot of lectures, they're bitterly divided. Bitterly because they fight each other, because they're one Maharashtrian community, one Tamil community, one doctor community, one lawyer community, and they're all vying for a photo op with a congressman. There's tremendous selfishness. I'm a defender of Hindus. I've been targeted, because I'm a defender of Hindus. But the greatest enemies of Hindus are Hindus. Yesterday and today. Yesterday, Alexander the Great could come to India because against Porus, the king of Taxila, made an alliance with him. Today, the greatest enemies of Hindus are Hindus. Both, the intellectual Hindus who are, demonizing Hindus, and the Hindus who are so passive and so selfish. So if Hindus would unite, they would be taken seriously. Nobody would dare, challenge them, because there are so many of them, and they're so educated. They don't kill people. They don't, take planes, hijack planes, and and ram them against towers full of innocent people. They don't burn themselves. They don't put suicide bomb. They're people who integrate themselves where they are, accept other people as they are. So wonderful people, but selfish. Your question is wrong, because if you think a little bit, you will understand that the fault is with Hindus, not with the Westerners, because the Westerners wouldn't dare, the Indologists wouldn't dare if Hindus were united, because the Hindu have economic power. The Chinese show how to use economic power. Economic power means you do something against me, I cancel this order. You write against me, I throw you out of my country. But this is not done. And we see that the Hindu government, elected by Hindus, because I don't think the BJP government got more than maybe 2-3% votes from other minorities. Today, even Sikhism is going away from them. So a government elected by Hindus is not working for Hindus. It is not working for Hindus at all. Hindus continue to be targeted in India. The sadhus are killed. They're made fun of. So you elect a government who's Hindu elected, and any government who, caters to its vote base. I mean, Congress comes to power, or Mamata Banerjee comes to power. She caters to Muslims to an extreme absurdity, because she knows that Muslim votes with a little bit of divided Hindu vote is enough to bring her back to power. Congress comes to power, they cater to people who have elected them. But Hindus come to power, they want to be seen as, as secular, and they will cry if a Dalit is killed. They will cry if, they will go to that cricketer's marriage. But they will not, cater to the people who elected them, who love them, who want them to do something for them also. Because, so the fault is with Hindus. I'm sorry, I'm a defender of Hindus, but I've been aware for a long time that there is such a thing called as karma, and whatever action you do as a repercussion tomorrow or later. Thank you.
My question was that the idea of decolonialization has taken.
You're putting your answer in the question, so it's absolutely a wrong question. You are giving me an answer. You're telling me in your question what to think about it. You're not asking me what I think about it. So I'll tell you what I'm thinking about it. Is that the fault is with the Hindus, nobody else. Nobody else, because they have the number, they have the power, they have the brains, they have the education. It's only up to them to unite and do something for them. We see that, for instance, you're crying, but, we see that the Muslim television, Al Jazeera, which has had the best of Western journalists from CNN and BBC, took them, and it's a world-class television which propagates the Islamic way. Every country from Qatar to Saudi Arabia, they buy football clubs, they buy this, they buy that. But Hindus don't care about that. They care about their children, sending them to America, get them to Harvard, get them to Oxford, get them to God knows where. But they don't care about their own brothers and sisters. So your question is wrong. The question is wrong. I'm sorry. I will conclude maybe by saying something that also answers what Ramakrishnan said. I don't do any favor to India. It's not that, I'm not Mother Teresa or Sonia Gandhi. I don't feel I come from a sense of superiority. actually, I got from India. Most of my knowledge comes from India, from Sri Aurobindo, Swami Vivekananda, from so many sages, Sri Ravi Shankar. I have learned so many things in India, whether it's pranayama, meditation, Ayurveda. I have met so many extraordinary people from, the simple people of Kerala when I started my journalist career to, yogis and sadhus. So I have a gratefulness and a debt towards India. So my seva is born out of gratitude, not out of that I'm and people listen to me because I'm a white man. But otherwise, many people have said the same thing. Many people have said the same thing. Unknown. Some of them known, some of them unknown. But because I'm a Frenchman and a white man, people listen to me. But the knowledge I got it here in India. I didn't bring it from outside. Okay.